Good morning, San Francisco. I'm from Michigan, East Coast, 3 hours ahead of this time. I've been awake for 3.5 hours already. I'm ready to go. All right, I got a couple other folks from the east side of the country. Excellent. Who's ever been in a classroom before? 2/3 of you. So pay attention to who did not raise your hand. Some people didn't finish grade school. Look out for them. Give them a little extra help throughout the day. Who's ever been in a classroom that looks like this before? Got a couple? Yes, excellent. We got a couple. Well, this is a different kind of a classroom. I'm coming from a company called Steelcase, western side of Michigan. For 102 years, we've been understanding work environments, workers, workplace, adult learners, adult learning environments. Our group is finding ways to bring some of that knowledge to the conference and event space. There's a lot of work, a lot of learning that takes place at these events. And we've been pulled into this market by some other participants, MPI, PCMA, Marriott, others who've said, you guys do great work. Can you do that kind of stuff here? We had to figure it out, and we did. So what you'll see, can you grab, if you have near your tables, a sheet that looks like this. I'm not going to go through all the detail here, but what this does is it says, why does this classroom look different? And it's not just the comfortable chairs. Each of these products does have a very specific design intent behind it, a dozen or more insights about how people work, how people learn, how people interact with each other, interact with content, that inform how the product is built. But then there's also ones designing this application. And so if you take a look at the side with the diagram of the room on it, you'll see 8 or so highlights of how presenters, speakers, attendees can use the room as a tool to accomplish outcomes. Our hypothesis is that the room environment is a tool to get your outcomes accomplished so that you can be accomplished, more accomplished in your event. So if you're interested in learning about how this is going to be one of the best breakout sessions of this entire conference and how we can take some of this to your event, take a look at the back. There's some contact information there. We did a session yesterday on high impact learning. I've got a follow-up. If you want to send us a note there, we can send it to you about the 12 key factors from our academic research we did with a couple of higher education institutions of what creates a high impact learning environment, how do you create active learning. So that's some of the interesting stuff that we've got going on relative to this space and this room layout. We're glad you're here. And other than becoming a master negotiator, this is my tip. Brad's going to give you some more. My tip is this. These are not the droids you're looking for. So we can try that. And if you want to have any other tips, Brad's going to have to help you work with that. So without further ado, let me introduce Brad, who's going to take it away.
Thanks. Great. Can you hear me all right? Are we okay? Okay, good. I don't really believe in tips very much. Because when you negotiate, you're not going to apply tips, you're going to apply strategies. So we're going to talk about strategies that you can learn and you can develop that'll help you negotiate more effectively. I should tell you that, I'm a psychologist. I need a psychologist, but I am a psychologist, which means that wherever possible, I don't want to give you a fad. There's a book called American Management and the Quick Fix. Down the left-hand column, I had all kinds of social fads. Hula hoops, pet rocks, chia pets, I don't know what, give me one more fad, quick, somebody. Beanie Babies. Yeah, Beanie Babies, yes, I have a whole collection to sell. All right. In the right-hand column, there are all kinds of management fads. Management by objectives, management by walking around, total quality management, the learning organization. And your job is to match the social fad with the management fad. So I don't believe in fads. I don't do fads. I don't do fads. But what I want to do is share with you some of the best research that you can use to develop strategies that will work both at work and at home, with one exception. Katie, raise your hand, please. This is my daughter. They don't work with Katie, but otherwise they would work for everything. Katie grew up wanting to be Prime Minister of Canada and tries to run the household as if she already were, but that's another story, and that's why I need a psychologist. Okay, so what's our mission? Okay, so what we're going to look at, we're going to focus on negotiation, but when you negotiate, you have to lead. At some point, you want to lead that negotiation where you want it to go so that you will get your interests satisfied as much as possible. Is that accurate? Okay. Are you here? Is that accurate? Okay, good. All right. Not only do you have to lead, but you have to learn how to negotiate. So we're going to talk about those strategies. Is there anybody here who has never been in a conflict? Just raise your hand. Okay. So you also need to, if you're going to negotiate, there are going to be conflicts. Is that accurate? Okay. And you know, you're meeting planners, so you have conflicts all the time. People don't show up, things go wrong, they blame you, right? It's always you. All right. Now, how well you negotiate depends on how well you present your negotiation, how good you are at influencing, and it depends on how well you communicate and how well you make decisions. Because we're going to see in a minute what the definition of negotiation is. Now, here's the important part. This is where the research comes in. Now, people who are masters, the top 10%, i.e. the people in this room, have developed 4 or 5 of these skill sets at the 90th percentile. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5. So that's where mastery comes in. All right. So we have an agenda. We're going to talk about being strategic. We are going to give you a tool called the Master Negotiator's Preparation Form. We are going to do a case study where you're going to help me negotiate. And then we've got time for questions and answers. And I will tell you that the group yesterday was the best group I have ever had in terms of asking questions. Is that right, Norris? You've been on my... They were outstanding. So you have a lot to live up to. All right. So what is negotiation? Negotiation is nothing more and nothing less than interactive decision-making. Nothing more and nothing less than interactive decision-making on one level. On another level, it's intrapersonal decision-making. Intra means within yourself. So whenever I'm negotiating with, what's your name? Becky. Becky's a master. So I'm negotiating with myself about how I'm going to negotiate with her. It's called meta-negotiation. So I'm negotiating with myself. And how well I do depends even more on how well I negotiate with myself than how I negotiate with Becky. Does that make sense? Yes? Are you here? This is interactive. Give me a yes. Yes. All right. I know it's early in the morning. Okay. So one vision of an organization is a complex network of agreements. Now, how well you do in your career depends on how well you architect agreements. And I use the word architect on purpose. How creative you are at coming up with agreements. But architect means that you're also planning ahead of time. Secondly, it's not one thing to have an agreement. It's another thing, and we talked about this morning, for people to be committed to carry out those agreements. Is that accurate? That's what you taught me this morning. All right. If you go to Safeway and you buy a gallon of milk, what does it have at the top? Okay. Agreements expire. So we have to know when it's time to change some of those agreements for the better. So how well do you architect, how good of a commitment you get, and how well you know when to change an agreement. Now, how well you do all of those things is fundamental to your success and the success of your organization. Now, there are principally 2 types of negotiations. The first negotiation is, in fact, a negotiation that you can prepare for. The biggest mistake that people make is they come to their negotiations overly confident and under-prepared. So filling out the master negotiator's preparation form will ensure that you will come to that negotiation 100% better prepared. So that's the form. Now, it's also your yellow pages. I know that's an archaic term, but Elizabeth has prepared for negotiation. And I mean, she is prepared. And she's one of the brightest people at MPI. And she's one of the most hardworking. However, she's not as confident as she could be or should be. Now, how important is confidence in negotiation? Critical. So, but Elizabeth is bright. So Elizabeth talks to 3 or 4 people in the room who are really good negotiators. And she says, look, this is my preparation form. Is there anything that I could do better? And Sarah gives Elizabeth an option that, as bright as Elizabeth is, Elizabeth wouldn't have thought of in a million years. And it turns out that that option is the difference between getting a deal and not getting a deal. Or she helps her with her consequences of not negotiating. 90% of how well you negotiate depends on how you start the negotiation. So there are a couple of words that are a little bit aggressive, just because of the party last night. And what happens is that you're helped changing those words, and now your confidence level has gone up. If it's a particularly tough negotiation, you want to role play that negotiation. So you are Tammy, and you're from?
Indiana University.
All right. And in Indiana, in January, they're putting on Shakespeare's most romantic play, Romeo and Juliet. Now, is Tammy going to show up opening night and say, here I am? I don't think so. She's going to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, because if Romeo here flubs a line, you'll be able to carry it out and nobody will know. Now, when you role play, you will role play it from your position. But even more importantly, you will role play it from the other party's position and get somebody to play you. Why is that so important? You want to know what your arguments sound like in the other person's shoes. Okay, so those are 3 ways to prepare, and then you really will come to the table with a great deal more self-confidence. Are you going to do this for every single negotiation? No. You would never go home. Some of you never go home anyway. I've been studying meeting planners. All right. Now, what the Master Negotiator's preparation form is a checklist. And this is Atul Gawande, one of the brightest lights in the country. And this is a checklist manifesto. So, for example, how many of you flew here? Just raise your hands. All right. So you're leaving. And I'm from Canada, so let's just pretend you're using Air Canada because we need the money because our money isn't as valuable as it used to be. So you're flying on Air Canada. And here's the pilot, and here's the first officer. What are they doing? They're checking that plane out. They want to make sure it has enough fuel. They want to make sure that the tires are there. They want to make sure there's no drones around. All right. Now, let's assume for a second that our pilot and first officer, because they're the top guns at Air Canada. I mean, they are the best. They're just below Captain Sully. All right. Because they've done this a gazillion times, on your particular flight, unfortunately, they decide to go to Starbucks. So our pilot is reading the newspaper because she's concerned about the lion that was killed in Africa. And our first officer is looking at one of those dating, whatever those things are. Now, knowing that they are not using the checklist, would you want to be on that plane? The answer is absolutely not. I'm going to give you one more example of the power of checklists. This is the infection rate in Michigan in an ICU. they put together a checklist that the surgeons had to go through before they operated on you. What difference did that make? The infection rate dropped 66% and then down to 0. In the first 18 months, they saved $175 million, and more than 1,500 lives were changed. That's the power of a checklist. All right. And if you email Lawrence at bradmcrae.com, he will send you a copy of the Master Negotiator's preparation form and the instructions on how to use it. Now, they also use the yellow pages. If you know anything about medicine, surgeons are at the top, and they have a reputation for being a little bit demanding, and they know what MD stands for, which is M-deity. All right. So they didn't want to use the checklist. But the procedure was, your name is? It says Sheriff. Good, Diane. All right. So she's the nurse, much lower on the totem pole. Before the surgeon can operate, he or she has to get permission from the sheriff, from Diane. They turned the whole thing around. So that was the yellow pages. That was a check on a check. All right. So what happened? They did a survey of surgeons, and 80% liked the checklist. 20% said they didn't want to use it. And here's the caveat. Of the 20% who said they didn't want to use it, when they asked them if the operation would be on them, would they want it to be used, 93% said yes. So this is the power of a checklist. And so you don't have to remember anything that I've said. It's all on the form. And if you get the instructions, then you'll know how to use it. The second type of negotiation. If the first is a negotiation you can prepare for, what, pray tell, is the second? Ones you can't prepare for. No matter how well you prepare, it is never going to go the way that you think it will. In negotiation, you always have to expect what? The unexpected. So, they're impromptu or they're spontaneous. And how well you do depends on your intuition. And most people don't understand intuition at all. So intuition is nothing more or nothing less than pattern analysis. So we have the 10,000 hour rule. People who are masters or experts have at least 10,000 hours because they can recognize so many patterns. So you take a master chess player, and that master chess player knows 50,000 patterns in chess. Anybody here know 50,000 patterns in chess? No. But you want to know as many patterns about how people negotiate, and you want to read those people as accurately as you possibly can. So it's pattern analysis. Not only do you need to know what the patterns are, you need to know when the patterns don't apply. Correct? You need to know when they apply. You need to know when they don't apply. So we're going to demonstrate that for us. Right now, our hosts, come up here. This is Jeremy. Come up here. This is very important. The whole presentation is on your shoulders. This is he's tall. This is the captain of the San Francisco Fire Department. And one of the most valued buildings is the Mission, and it's on fire. So, fire chief, you've got two people who are going to assist you to put out this fire. So would the two assistants come up here quickly? The fire is burning. You're on the left-hand side, slightly below the captain. Okay, left. Doesn't matter, you're on this side. I guess I was going for mine. All right, now pick up your fire hoses. Okay, and now let's really get some action. I want you to really put out that fire. All right. Now, all of a sudden, that's very good. All of a sudden, Jeremy says, get the hell out.
Get out.
And you force these people out. Okay, now let's come back and see what was going on. So let's just come back, instant replay. And you can just be still right now. So we're at that 1 second where he says, get the hell out. All right. So what happened? First of all, your feet are getting uncomfortably hot. It's not athlete's foot. You should be hearing the roar of the flames, but it's really muffled. And you've put on a ton of water and the fire is not going out. Where's the fire? In the basement, underneath, right? Now the question is, did he have time to think through that process? And the answer is no. Spontaneously, he said, get the hell out. So that was based on pattern analysis. This fire wasn't going the way the fires usually go. And as a result, you saved Mark's life. Congratulations. And your name is? Jen. Okay, congratulations. You perished, but that's okay. You saved the building. But I want you to understand the power of pattern analysis and knowing when those patterns apply and when they don't. So there are some people, your name is? Kate. It's not true. But there are some people who pretend to be very cooperative. They're very nice. They put you at ease. They bring you coffee. And then they're just waiting for a chance to use a dirty trick. So somehow we need to pick that up before it happens. Or when it happens, we have to have the wherewithal to say, listen, I'm sure it's not true, but I feel like the two of you are playing good cop, bad cop. Now, why didn't I say, listen, you're playing good cop, you're playing bad cop. Stop it. Why did I say I'm not sure, but I think maybe you might be playing good cop, bad cop? It was a confrontation. But I wanted to confront them at the lowest level of muscle possible. I don't want things to escalate. I know you'd never do that. All right. So, when we think about patterns and we think about preparing, we make assumptions. And we need to know when those assumptions work for us and when they work against us. In fact, it's at 3 levels. If you're going to be a master negotiator, you need to know what your assumptions are. You need to know what your assumptions are about your assumptions and your assumptions about your assumptions about your assumptions. Let's see how that looks. Oh. Sound. There are 5 approaches to negotiation. The first one is to postpone, delay, or avoid. There are some times that you do not want to negotiate with that person, ever. And there are other times you want to postpone. When might you want to postpone? They throw you a curveball. And so what you can say is, you've really worked on this, and I need to think about it for a couple of minutes, or I'll get back to you tomorrow. And you say, I have a conference call I have to take, and you do. It's true. So you go out, and you know what to do A, B, C, and D, but on F you are absolutely flummoxed. So you call Sharon on your yellow pages. And Sharon is able to point out, because she's not emotionally involved, that you did a good job on A, B, C, and D, but F is the sticking point. Now, I ran into that same problem, and I tried this. And then you go back, and you can negotiate more effectively. You know that sometimes you've gone to the washroom, and you're not even thinking about a problem. And all of a sudden, you're walking back, and you have this brilliant idea. So that's intuition. But I don't want to just use my intuition. I want to use the intuition of 3 or 4 other people in this room when I get stuck. And then I will negotiate more effectively. So again, that's your what pages? I'm sorry, I'm getting hard of hearing. Okay. Listen, the research shows that you have to hear something about 7 times to have an 80% chance of remembering it. If you write it down, you will have a 60% better chance of remembering it. If you vocalize it, you will have a 60% better chance of remembering it. If there's some emotion and some action in what you say. So if you want to remember this stuff, and because I'm hard of hearing, you're going to have to participate more. Because how much energy I have depends on how much energy you have. Okay, take it or leave it. Is that ever appropriate in negotiation? Absolutely. There are some things that are not negotiable. Often ethics. Enron negotiated things that they should not have negotiated, and people ended up in jail, and a lot of people were hurt. So you have to know when to negotiate and when not to negotiate. I've done work for years with Michelin, fantastic company, and there was a Formula One race, and they had a lot of the tires for the cars, and then they canceled their part of the race. And they got a lot of bad press for that. Why did they cancel it? Because the pavement wasn't safe. And they put safety first. Now, the mistake that they made was they didn't tell people why they did it. Hard bargaining. So I'm negotiating with, your name is? Chloe. I knew that. Okay. I'm negotiating with Chloe. And Chloe is a hard bargainer. She wants to get 90% of what she wants, and she might let me get 10%. What do? I have to come on more strongly and more assertively, almost than I'm comfortable with. Because that is the only style that she respects. And once I come on more strongly, or as strongly as Chloe, then she'll respect me, and she's going to know that I'm not a pushover, and she'll decide that, hey, I'm going to cooperate with this guy. Why? Because getting a deal is better than not getting a deal. And I'll show you some research later on about the effectiveness of different styles. Compromise. Is that ever effective? Yes. You know, we're $100 apart. Okay, we'll just split the difference. All too often, however, we compromise and we leave gains on the table. So there's another form. It's called often win-win, but I don't believe in win-win. It's a setup. Because there are times when you're going to try to do win-win, and politically, you don't have the capital to get win-win. Or it's in your best interest, in this case, to let Erica get more than you get. But in the next negotiation, you're going to give me more of what I want. Okay. So in 10, 20, 30% of the cases, depending, you're not going to get win-win. All right. But it's this non-adversarial, interest-based, integrative, mutual problem solving. And I'm going to give you a very good example. Took place right here at the San Francisco International Airport. So there are 8 rent-a-car companies. 8. Fierce competitors. Yes? All right. What they did is they decided to share the buses. The passengers got there much more quickly. The rent-a-car companies saved money. They saved over 30 million gallons of fuel per year, and they lowered the emission rates because it was in their best interest to work cooperatively. Are you with me? All right. Now, one negotiation often leads to another negotiation. Is that accurate? I'm sorry, are you guys here? Yes. Okay, that's more like it. Okay, so there are 8 floors. What's the next negotiation? Who gets which floor? So what floor do you want? You want the 1. Okay. Now, that's an assumption. Because if you were really well prepared, you would have known that in 2 years they were going to have a monorail. And so therefore, where you wanted to be was the 8th floor. Now, style trumps substance every time. So this is the research that I found on negotiating style. Okay, first of all, we need to know when our style works for us and where it works against us. Secondly, if you look at this picture, which took me 2 years to develop, it's a large ship in the Pacific Ocean, and right here there's a rudder. Now, what the naval architects did is they added a trim tab to the rudder. So it's a small rudder on the large rudder. Why did they do that? The answer is leverage. So it gets some momentum going, and then they need smaller engines. They can carry more cargo. Absolutely brilliant. Now, what does this have to do with negotiation? The trim tab is your negotiation style. And again, if you control your style, you will have more control over the negotiation. And if you have more control over the negotiation, you are going to have more control over the outcome. Very good. All right. So what's the research show about negotiation style? And this has been done 5 times, replicated, so we have a better sense that it's actually true. All right. The research found that there were 3 primary styles: cooperative, aggressive, and no pattern. So I called Gerald Williams up and said, what does no pattern mean? They were cooperative sometimes and aggressive the other. And he said, no pattern means that we couldn't determine a pattern. However, the important question is, and Francis Bacon, the British philosopher, said that a pertinent question is half wisdom. A pertinent question is half wisdom. All right. So what he added to it was it's not enough to know what your style is. How many people in the room, your primary style is cooperative? Just raise your hands. Okay. And how many aggressive? Okay, thank you for being honest. Now I know who to be careful about. Okay, so 59% of the cooperatives, about 2/3 were effective. And 3% were what? Ineffective. So, ineffective means that they are gullible, naive, too trusting, and frequently taken advantage of. Is there anybody in the room who has never been taken advantage of? So it's going to happen. But we don't want that to happen for the most part. So if I'm negotiating with, your name is? Francis, okay. And let's assume that you're one of those ineffectives. I can claim most of the value. Thank you, I need a new computer. Okay. And do you have a wallet? No, seriously. You don't. Car keys? Nope. No. This is yours? Yep. Okay, good. So, I'm leaving now. So they're frequently taken advantage of, correct? So what do I get for giving this back? Breakfast, lunch, or dinner? Your choice. Uh-oh, see what you've done? Dirty trick.
See what happens?
Yeah, okay. See what happens? All right. So our effective cooperatives, what are they like? First of all, they come to the table incredibly well prepared. Secondly, and this is the one that I have the most difficulty with, they can disagree without being disagreeable. And they are strategically cooperative. They know when they should cooperate and when they shouldn't. Are you with me? Okay. Now, our aggressives, 33% or 1/3 are ineffective. Now, what are they like? They are obnoxious. So somebody calls you on the phone, within 30 seconds you want to slam down the receiver. That's an indication. They are one-trick ponies. All they know how to do is be aggressive. And thirdly, if you call their bluff, you'll find out that they came to the table ill-prepared. All right. Our effective aggressives want win-lose. Their primary style is, I want to win, and it's going to be at your expense. However, they are flexible, and they know that getting a deal is better than not getting a deal. So they will collaborate and compromise if it's in their best interests. All right. So, we're going to take a look at a finding from all of this research that talks about your effective negotiators, regardless of style, and the three characteristics that they have is they come to the table impeccably well prepared, including using their yellow pages when necessary, and role-playing it when necessary. Because by role-playing it, you're going to see that there are things that you hadn't thought of. You're going to see that by saying this, it's not going to work, but by saying that, it is going to work. They are flexible, so they can come on harder and more assertive than if they were totally cooperative, because it's in their best interest. And they have incredible self-control. Are you with me? Okay. So, what you want to do is you want to be as strategic a negotiator as possible. Now, there aren't many people that wear watches anymore, but I am, and you are. And your name is?
Jen.
Jen, okay. So this morning, Jen, when you got up, did you negotiate with yourself if the watch would be on your left wrist or right wrist?
No.
Crystal up or crystal down? You might still be deciding, right? So it's a habit. There's a situation, and we react. It saves us a whole bunch of time. Very good. There are other situations where we need to give ourselves a choice. And there are other situations where we need to give ourselves a strategic choice. Let me give you an example. Very pertinent to meeting planners. Vancouver and Calgary were selected to have the Olympics, the Winter Games in 1984. Now, how important is it for those cities to get the Winter Games? Billions of dollars. All right. So, they had to go before the Canadian Olympic Society, and they had to present their best case. Calgary, you're from Calgary. This is...
Yep.
Yes?
Sue.
Sue from Calgary. So Sue talks to the committee, and she says, at one point, at a critical point in the negotiation, we have a strategic advantage over our fellow city, Vancouver. How's she doing? Does she have their attention? Yeah, she's doing very well. And she says that strategic advantage is that we already have some Olympic-class facilities that are already built. Now, who's from Vancouver? Okay. Vancouverites kind of are hippies, lots of different colors. And Vancouver, Texas. Okay. And you are Cindy. So this is a critical point in that negotiation. If Cindy says the right thing strategically, Vancouver will probably get the Olympics. If she doesn't, it's going to Calgary. Do you agree? And right now it looks like Calgary's ahead. We have a strategic advantage. We already have Olympic quality facilities that are already built. So, what does Cindy say? Exactly. We will build newer and better state-of-the-art facilities. And the Olympics were awarded to Vancouver. Actually, I got the cities wrong, but that's all right. So that reaction, what's your name, sir? Nick. That was a strategic thing to say. But you say, yes, they have excellent facilities. You want to disarm them. You don't be However, we will build brand new state-of-the-art facilities. Now, we know when they do the Olympics, it's very important because most of the money comes from television. Now, the Olympics before, 8 years before, were in Lake Placid. So now you're going out and you're negotiating with NBC, ABC, and CBS to get money for the television rights. $15 million is what ABC paid in 1980. So, Frank King, one of the people I interviewed as a master negotiator, set up a different type of negotiation. He went to each of the television stations and he asked a high-yield question. High-yield questions give you lots of information so that you can negotiate incredibly more effectively. So one of the high-yield questions he asked ABC is, what would you need if this was going to be the best Winter Olympics in history for you, the broadcaster? Does he have their attention? Yes. And they said, listen, the Winter Olympics are 12 days long. There's only 2 weekends. Some of the hockey games aren't even broadcast. Some of the figure skating isn't broadcast. If we had 16 days, there'd be 3 weekends. And he said, listen, they've been promising that for years, and it's never happened. And he said, I guarantee it will happen, and it did. He went to CBS, and they said, listen, the camera angles aren't the way they should be. They build the facility, then they put in the camera angles. They need to do that ahead of time. And they did. Now, how much did they pay for the right to broadcast the Olympics at Lake Placid in 1980? The answer is $15 million. Now, the question is, how much did they pay in Calgary in 1988? Somebody give me a number. Sorry? 30, okay. I hear 30. Any more? 80? Any more? $320 million. $320 million. Because he showed the television station what's in it for them. So when we negotiate, we have to absolutely understand who we're negotiating with and figure out what's in it for them, because we want to make it easy for them to say yes. And we want to make it difficult for them to say no. $47 million surplus for amateur sports. And if you know anything about the Summer Olympics in Montreal, they finally paid it off 30, 40 years later. All right. Okay. So, we're going to do a case study. And so what I'd like you to do is take out the Master Negotiator's preparation form. And I'd like you to fill it out for this case study, because if you fill it out, you'll be 60% more likely to remember it. Now, this is the brief form. There's a longer form. And if you want that longer form, you will email Lawrence. So it's Lawrence, Lawrence, at Brad, B-R-A-D, McRae, M-C-R-A-E.com. And you will get it. Lawrence is an engineer, has an MBA, and does ISO 9000 consulting. There's no detail that he can't lose. There's no detail I can remember. Okay. So you'll get a copy of the form plus the instructions on how to fill it out by emailing Lawrence. All right. So this is a case study. And in the case study, we're going to talk about strategic ways to negotiate. The first one is choice points. Now, a choice point is an incredibly important point in that negotiation, whereby if you do the right thing at the right time, that negotiation will move forwards towards an effective resolution. If you do the wrong thing in the wrong time with the wrong person, the negotiation will stalemate, break off, or escalate. Okay, so we're talking about choice points. Now, Daniel Goleman wrote the first book on emotional intelligence. And what he says is that awareness is the master aptitude. Awareness is a master aptitude. We already talked about that. Being aware of when a pattern is valid and when a pattern is not. Are you with me? Choice points. So, Sarah's undergoing heart surgery with surgeon Tammy, and it looks like it's going to be the same operation that you've done a million times before, which is why you're the go-to person for heart surgery. But something tells you that something else is wrong. And so you change the procedure and you save Sarah's life. Okay, that was a choice point. Do I follow my intuition? Or do I say, nah, it's not important, I'll just do what I always do? Are you with me? So those are choice points. And awareness is a master aptitude. And we're going to see how that applies in the case study in just a minute. Asking high-yield questions, like we saw in the Olympics. High-yield questions give you information, and you'll negotiate 80% more effectively once you have that information. We're going to actually display negotiation jiu-jitsu, and we're going to talk about the importance of disarming. So we already had one example of disarming. I'm sure you're not playing good cop, bad cop. Let's continue. This must be my imagination. So you've confronted them in the most subtle way possible. So they know that you know what they're doing. Now, you may need to use more muscle level later, but you want to start at low-level muscle because you don't want things to escalate. And things in a negotiation can escalate very quickly. Let's look at the Democrats and the Republicans. And every time you negotiate, you set a precedent. And you want to set precedents that will work for you, not against you. So, I'm negotiating with Kate. Yes, Kate. And I really like her. And you can't not like Kate. And she tells me a sad story about her hotel, and they're going to go out of business if they don't get this contract, and people are going to be laid off. And she starts crying. So I give you a nice discount. How long is it going to take before everybody in the hotel industry knows that if they play on my heartstrings, they'll get a discount? How long? Not long. So we have to be very careful about setting precedents that'll work for us and not against us. All right. So, the master negotiator's mantra is, it's early in the morning. I get everybody to just stand up for 1 second. I want to wake you guys up. All right. This is the master negotiator's mantra. Mark, will you come and help me? Okay, so find a partner, and you're going to repeat after me the mantra. If you don't have a partner, raise your hands. Raise your hands. Anybody not have a partner? Okay, if you can go back to the back of the room, there's a very nice woman that's waiting for you. Oh, you're a partner. Okay. All right. All right. Do it in groups of 3 if you need to. Okay. The Master Negotiator's mantra, so Mark, you're going to help me. We're going to shake hands. Now, shaking hands is a sign of what? Agreement. All right. So, Mark and I are going to demonstrate, and then you are going to do it together in perfect harmony. So, the Master Negotiator's mantra is you cannot change somebody's mind if you do not know where their mind is. So we're going to shake hands in that same rhythm because we want to anchor it kinesthetically. All right, are you ready? Okay, you cannot change, no, this is your part. Yeah, you cannot change somebody's mind if you do not know where their mind is. Okay, shake hands with somebody in the room and repeat the mantra. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Well done. Thank you, Mark. Okay. At this point, for people who are listening, I have lost total control over this audience. Okay, you can sit down, please. In other words, as Roger Fisher says, you need to be able to summarize their case in the negotiation, the way they see it, more strongly and more succinctly than they can. So you can't change somebody's mind if you don't know where their mind is. All right. So, in each negotiation, there are 3 things we want to take a look at. What is the substantive outcome of that negotiation? How well do we do in this negotiation? All these handouts are going to be online with MPI. So how well do we do? What are the details of the deal? And we pay very close attention to that. We don't pay as close of attention, at least in the past, about the relationship. And you, more than anybody, knows the importance of building relationships. That's the foundation of what you do, is it not? All right. And the third one is, what kind of a process are we going to use? And that's the one that people pay the least attention to. In fact, the research shows that when you have information, analysis, and process weighs 6 times more than information and analysis. You can have the information analysis down perfectly, but if you're using the wrong process, i.e. I'm negotiating with you and I come on adversarially, it's not going to work. Or if you're an adversary, then I have to figure out a way to disarm you so that we can work together cooperatively. And that's called meta-negotiation. So not only do we negotiate about how we're going to negotiate. Perfect example of that. In negotiations, people often reach an impasse. Because you think you're right, and I know that I'm right. You know what's fair, but it's not. What I know is fair. And so we're in this adversarial position about what's fair, what's the best thing to do. Roger Fisher would say, to change the way we negotiate, do you want more than what's fair? 9 times out of 10, you're going to say no. All right, so then, how can we find some objective criteria to help us decide what's fair? Now, you know Mark. They warned me about Mark. I prayed that Mark wouldn't be in my session. And Mark says, yes, I do want more than what's fair. What do I do? How dare you? I say, tell me what that looks like. Because when you tell me what it looks like, I don't have a problem with it. That's being strategic. Or I say to him, I'm sure that would make your director really happy. But I also have to make my director really happy. If you were in my shoes and I did that, what would you say to my director? So it's putting him in my shoes so he can look at it from my perspective. All right. Oh, okay. Now the case study. This is a non-business, well, it is a business case study. But I wanted to use something that's fairly universal. And we're going to use the Master Negotiator's preparation form. So we're going to go back 23 years. And it is about a month before Christmas. And so we go in to Sears to get the Christmas portrait done. While we're waiting to get the portrait, we go to another store, and my wife is negotiating with my son to get winter boots. And he wants the winter boots that have the Mutant Ninja Turtle decal on them, which are 10 times more expensive than the boots that don't. At the same time, my daughter Katie was in her stroller, and she spied out of her little eye character slippers. So character slippers look like stuffed animals. I let her out of the stroller. She made a beeline and tripped and fell headfirst into the display. To my horror, the display is held up by pegboard hooks, 8 inches long, 1/4 inch round, up like this, and one of the hooks caught her in the eye. Now, she's perfectly all right physically. Now, I had 2 interests. So if you look at the form, one of my interests, my primary interest was what? That Katie would be all right. That I would protect her as much as I possibly could. And secondly, I didn't want this to happen to anybody else. Now, I should go back for just 1 second. Can I borrow you for a second? Ma'am, can I borrow you? Sure. Okay, just come on up here. Okay. For the next 3/4 of a minute, you have the privilege of being my wife. No. Believe me. I used to do marriage and family counseling, and then I got divorced, so I didn't have much credibility. At any rate, what happened is when she fell into that display, I was worthless. I had no idea what to do. I was panic-stricken. I couldn't even find the car. So, what did Lynn do? From the top of her head, I saw this woman transform. I don't believe in auras, but I saw her transform herself. From the top of her head, she gained perfect composure and control of herself. And she had that because she was a doctor. So she, for the time that we got to the hospital, she did not allow herself to be Katie's mother. She became a doctor. So this is Katie. Be very careful. Okay. And now give her to the nurse. Yeah. Very carefully. Okay. Now, what happened to Lynn? She completely fell apart. All right? So it depends on what role do we put ourselves in. And I can't tell you how much I admired her for doing it, because there's no way on earth that I could have done it. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.
Okay.
And you were a great husband.
Yes, thank you. Can we talk later? Sure. Okay. Okay. So my major interest was that Katie would be all right. And the second one, I didn't want this to happen to anybody else. What's the store's interest? What's one of the things that the store cares about? Just raise your hand. Yeah, okay. Liability. And I'll point to the person. So they care about liability. What else do they care about? Somebody else. Their public relations. And they don't want this to happen to anybody else either. So why are we negotiating? Because we prioritize our interests differently. Fair enough? All right. Now, the prize is the ultimate outcome from the negotiation. It can be the same as what your interests are, or it can be different. So what I wanted was a strategic alliance with the store so that they could help raise the level of awareness and stop this type of accident from happening. The store wanted to do what? Maintain their reputation. Is that correct? No. They wanted to enhance their reputation. This is just like in Tylenol, 1982, the gold standard in dealing with a crisis was the way Tylenol dealt with that. And it's a case study today on how to do it right. So this isn't for them, they shouldn't think of how do they maintain their reputation. This is an opportunity for them to enhance their reputation. It didn't quite turn out the same way for British Petroleum. All right. So, we've looked at the interests, and the acid test for an interest is an interest can't be either or. An interest has to lead to multiple options. So if I said, I want a settlement of $100 million, that's not an interest. Because there's only one way to satisfy it, monetarily. What was more important to me was the non-monetary. For them to step up to the plate and be a model for how to deal with this. For them to be the equivalent of Tylenol. Are you with me? It's a different way of thinking. Enhance. Most people settle for maintain. How many of the men here are in a relationship? Just raise your hands. Yes? No, raise them high. Don't be ashamed. Okay. All right. So, your name is? Tyler. Tyler goes home to his partner and says, I really learned a lot today. And I want to talk to you about how we can maintain our relationship. How excited is your partner going to be? Not very. But if you say, listen, I want to talk to you about how we can enhance our relationship, then you can come up with options, like hire a babysitter once a month.
She'd say, who are you?
Well, I still do a little bit of marriage counseling, so we can talk afterwards. Okay, so those are the interests and the options. Oh, Lawrence, we have this. Where is this? Okay, we have this on the screen as well. So again, this is a Master Negotiator's preparation form. This is your checklist to make sure that you negotiate as well as you possibly could. So I could say that my interest... Huh? Unblanket, yes. Oh, me have to unblanket, okay. See, I told you. All right, so I could say that my prize is to maintain the relationship. But I talked to Tina on my yellow pages, and she says, Brad, you're missing an opportunity. And the opportunity isn't to maintain the relationship, but to enhance it. And that's what you want to do with your clients and your strategic partners. Is that accurate? I'm sorry, is that accurate? Yes. Okay. So, can you bring it down? So, then we want to ask high-yield questions. And I'll give you an example of a high-yield question in just a minute. I'll come back to that. And then, what are some options for a settlement? So one option is that I could say to the store, please change all of your hooks. But I want to come to the table. The law of four says I want to come to the table with at least 4 options. So another option, because I did my research, 82% of the accidents happen to children aged 1 to 4. So if we can't change them all at once, Let's start from 3 feet down. Or let's start from 3 feet down in parts of the store where children are most likely to be. So what are some options we can put on the table? And again, I'm not going to know all of them, so I'm going to talk to my yellow pages because they may give me an option that I never thought of. And that option makes the difference between getting a deal and not getting a deal. Are you with me? Okay. And there's research that proves this. At Bell Labs, the people that were the best networkers, everybody had an IQ of 140 or above. But the people that had the most products and the most breakthroughs were the people who were the best networkers. So you call somebody in Australia and you say, I know you've dealt with something like this before, and they will either give you an answer or a question that will help you arrive at an answer. Most negotiators significantly underestimate and underutilize their yellow pages. So what are some options? Now this is presupposing we can come to an agreement. That's important. These are options presupposing we can come to an agreement. Okay, next one please, Lawrence. Okay, this is our BATNA. You can just put it both up there. Our BATNA is our best alternative to a negotiated agreement. We're only as strong at the table as our BATNA away from the table. So if I'm putting on a meeting and you have the only hotel in the city that's big enough to hold what I want, I'm at a significant disadvantage because I have no BATNA. Now, if we're really creative, I can talk to 4 or 5 medium-sized hotels and ask them to put in a joint proposal. That's my BATNA. So now I have more leverage at the table. Are you with me? All right. So in this case, my BATNA was to go to the media, which I did. My BATNA was to get 26 women with young children to come down to the store with me. My BATNA is to sue the store. Now, I want to tell you something really important. 90% of what we think, social anthropologists, 90% of what we think is culturally and linguistically determined. Are you with me? Culturally and linguistically determined. On the surface, Canada and the United States look like very similar countries. They are not. In Canada, the compensation that we got for Katie's eye accident was $14,000. $14,000. Had that happened here in San Francisco, it would be worth $1 or $2 million. And I know that because I consult with people who had that kind of accident. So the United States probably overcompensates, well, no, probably, and we undercompensate. All right. So, what's the store's BATNA? The store can blame the victim. Had you paid more attention, your daughter would not have had this accident. It's true. That the store is still responsible. And we'll get to that in just a minute. What the store did was stall. They said they would replace all of the hooks. 6 months later, none of the hooks were replaced because they thought I would go away. They had no idea how obsessive and compulsive I am. All right. The WHATNA is the worst alternative to a negotiated agreement. They don't compensate us. They don't help us prevent future eye accidents, which is what I want. And they get significantly negative experience. Press. Think of the dentist. All right. And we'll talk about the opening statement in just a minute. 5 minutes what? I have 5 minutes left? Oh my God. Okay. Turn this thing off. So you guys are so good. All right, so what happened is that I wrote a letter saying what happened to us as a family. I got a letter back from the vice president saying, clearly we have kitty hazards, and we will look at changing our display hooks after Christmas. Is that acceptable? No. So we wrote a letter back saying what happened. Nothing happened. So I started negotiating with the president, and then he was away. So then I negotiated with the vice president. So can I use you really quickly? Yes. Okay, come up here. So I want to take you through that negotiation. You are?
Nick.
Nick. Okay, Nick, just stand right here. You bet. All right. So what happened is that I recorded the conversation. Because in Canada, as long as one person knows that you can do it, in the United States, I understand you can only do that in Ohio. So if you want to record a conversation, go to Ohio. Now, I recorded the conversation not because I was going to use it. I recorded the conversation so I could get feedback on how well I negotiated about something I felt incredibly strongly about. So we've got a whole bunch of feedback forms. Most people don't get the feedback that they need to improve. So I'm going to take you through that conversation. So I'm at home, and he says, what would you like us to do? I said, I would like you to remove those hooks from your store. He said, I'm not sure that's practical or possible. Now, I could say, why isn't that practical or possible? What's wrong with you? Don't you have children? How many children do you want to name? Okay, not a good idea. I'm going to ask a high-yield question. And listen carefully, changing one word. Why isn't it practical or possible? The word why is often accusatory. All of you have been teenagers and you've come home late, and the first thing your parents say is, why did you do this? How could you do this? Well, okay, you understand. So, all right. So I say, please, I'm going to disarm him with a high-yield question. Help me understand how it is not practical or possible. Because I can't change somebody's mind if I don't know where their mind is. He said, I don't want to be a smartass, but frankly, we have more accidents on elevators and escalators. Now, if I have no control, I'm going to just go wild. But for some reason, at this point, I had self-control. And I said, please help me understand how you're protecting children from accidents on escalators and elevators. What did I just do? High-yield question. All right. Now, Nick, listen very carefully. Okay. Take a deep breath, relax. I want you to come at me as if you were going to hit me in the face with your fist. Okay?
Slow motion.
No, but you're going to stop 1 foot before impact.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
In Calgary, I got my jaw broken. Okay?
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, go. That's about 8 inches, but anyway. So what I do in jiu-jitsu is I take his wrist, I take his elbow, and I use his argument to make my case. Correct? So I said to him, how are you protecting children from accidents on escalators and elevators? He said, we've put up signs, and our safety committee is looking into it. So what do I say? Well, can you put up signs, and can your safety committee look into it? For him to say no, whose logic does he have to refute? His own. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. You should study your metrics. For the audience, this guy almost clipped me. Okay, now, what happened? I used my BATNA, and I went above the president to the chair of the board of directors. Because under director's liability, if there's another accident and the directors know, they are responsible. So what happened? I got a letter from the president and the CEO apologizing to me for how I was treated by the vice president. Kind of had negative impact on his career. And he said, listen very carefully, within 7 days, we will bend back all of our hooks and make them safer until they can be replaced. Now, how many hooks were there? 10 million display hooks. We talked about setting viable precedents. So I talked with Sony about their displays. Sony did more than I imagined that I could ask for. They took their single-prong display hooks and they melted them down and destroyed them so nobody else could use them. And they made a $500 donation to the Canadian National Institute for the Blind in my name. And then when I negotiated with the Gap, right here in San Francisco, they said they would change the displays in the children's Gap, but not the adult Gap. I thought there was a gap in their thinking. But I sent them the letter from Sony, and they changed all of their hooks worldwide. Am I out of time? I'm out of time. Do you have time for one question? Sure. Okay. Do we have a book? Okay. Our three firefighters are going to get a book, and we have time for one question.
Time is up. So.
Time is up? All right. One quick question, but it has to be a good one. Yes?
If I want to go into a little bit more detail about all of this, did you write this book?
Yes. Okay. If you want more detail on your form, you can get the book. You can get the Master Negotiator's workbook, and it has 2-party, 3-party, 4-party, 5-party negotiations. Because when you have more people, it's significantly more complex. So you take n, you have 6 people, you have 5, so it's the number n times n minus 1. All right. All of that's available. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your being here. Thank you.